have Mr. Daggar Tola, the Acting Secretary General of the Democratic Socialist Movement. Thank you for coming to our studio.
Well, we want to say a very big thank you to Sahara reporters for all of this effort, the role you play in providing enlightenment and consciousness to the mass. We cannot but applaud the differences you have brought into the media world in this part of the world. Thank you very much.
The word corruption is becoming meaningless to Nigerians. What is corruption?
Well, let me begin. Well, I don't want to join issues with morality, so we must return to its economic and political, practical terms. And this refers to money inducement. That would be the first layer of explanation. When money is used as an instrument to do those normal things that ought not to attract any money for any of those things to be done. That is one level. But more importantly, when you talk about corruption, you are referring to its monster hydra, snake many heads in relation to the polity, where individuals that have been opportuned, that have been entrusted with political power, have used power as a means of cutting away the resources of the country, enriching themselves on the basis of impoverishing the entirety of the whole of society. And I think this is where corruption has all of its meaning. This is where a lot of people have opined that this is the problem with the country. Achebe had this huge classic in the early 80s, where he wrote The Trouble with Nigeria, where he pointed out that this was the major problem with the country. When the coup plotters of the 15th January, led by Nzogo and co, launched their attack on the civil regime of the First Republic and brought that regime to an end, their major slogan was the VIPs who were taking 10% from all contracts that were issued. So corruption has been at the tail end from the beginning of the country till present day, and that monster, has remained with all of us. And you must begin to clearly want to understand what is responsible for this. How do we begin to tackle it? And I say that regime after regime has failed, including the current Buhari regime. It has failed. And this was a government that came into power on the basis of credentials. I shouldn't say the government. The president himself came into the party or came into the election in 2015 with the credentials of having run a government in 1983, because he became the president when the Second Republic was brought to an end. And you had politicians being jailed 80 years, 100 years, governors were tried, and people were sentenced. But all of this, at the end of the day, amounted to practically nothing. Because if you must talk about corruption, you must return back to how the resources of the country are made, how the means of productions are managed, who controls the means of production, for what interest, for what purpose. This, for somebody like us or for us, is where we must begin to understand what corruption is. For a society where a majority of its resources are managed in a way and manner that those resources will not be invested in the development of the society. It means that you are making the way free and ready for those who control these resources to transfer them into private property. And that's exactly what has been happening since 1999 till date. With the rapid growth of the rabbit philosophy of neoliberalism. And we have seen this philosophy evolved, repackaged from one form to the other. First, it was packaged as a structural adjustment program in the late 80s. You now had this launch mantra by the IMF and the World Bank in the name of policies of deregulation and massive privatization. But the fundamentals is that for a country, for an oil-producing country like Nigeria, with all of its huge resources, operating an economic philosophy that says that it is the private sector that develops the means of production, what happens to all of its wealth? Which explains why the ruling elites in Nigeria are one of the highest level of political officers earners in the whole world. And it cannot but be so, because the wealth of the country is free for looting. So fundamentally, you can't have capitalism without having corruption for a country like ours. And I tell people that I don't need to trip from Nigeria out of the world. I just need to trip back to Lagos 1979 to 1983 and look at the UPN states. In fact, I don't even need to go outside of Lagos. You had a Latif Jakonde government in Lagos state that ran a government on the basis of using the resources, using public funds. Houses were developed, education, the highest massive expansion of education that has ever taken place in Lagos State took place under the Latif Jakonde regime in Lagos State. Over 30 to 40,000 teachers were employed by that government. Interestingly, those generation of teachers that were employed 80, 81, 82, 83 are buying out of service this past two, 3 years. General hospitals were built. Massive road networks were built on the basis of the public funds of this country. In fact, Lagos today is on the basis of that kind of development that has taken place, not on the basis of private capital. When you refer to private capital, where is private capital coming from? Electricity has been nationalized by the ruling elites. For how much? How much bailout has been given? How much are these characters making from the private bills that they are imposing on all of us? And yet, as we scream, as we are today, they are telling us that what Nigerians are paying for electricity that is not being supplied is still not enough. And yet, the country has invested its wealth on it. We are told that we can't build a refinery. Can this country muster the resources to put in place new functional refineries? The country has been told that we must wait for the private capital of Dangote. Who is Dangote? What are all of his source of wealth ultimately? If we must begin appropriate investigation as to what is. So when people talk about corruption and tell us that corruption is a problem, for those of us who are socialists, we said partially yes, but if you must fight corruption, it is not about chasing those who have looted the resources. Yes, they need to be chased, but this system is incapable of chasing those that have looted the resources of this country. Because as long as they continue to patronize the system, keep the system going, more and more corruption will continue in the country.
How can we fight corruption when we're not sincere about even the fundamental decent wages for our people? If our people are not empowered, if our people are deliberately disempowered, how can they be empowered to fight corruption?
Now, thank you very much, because the question of a minimum wage, is linked to all of this. And let me begin with the police, because a lot of people have enormous good negative stories to tell about the police. I also have my experience with the police. But ultimately, we can't run away from the fact that the police are humans. They live in this society, and they're also bound to try to survive. And that is why we have always supported and put forward the slogan for the need of a police union. Because you don't pay people poverty wages and hand over guns to them. They're going to use those guns as a means to provide additional privileges to themselves. And I think you have struck the point. Unfortunately for all of us, the ruling elites know the import of what wages is. They pay themselves extremely fantastic wages. We've had presidents we've had states who have returned, who are retired and are earning the allowances as retired presidents and retired head of states, and are presidents and are continuing to earn, a new allowances. We have governors who have gone with severances that are equal, to what a standing governor is. And they are senators and they are earning all of these fantastic wages. And you hand over 18,000 naira as minimum wage to somebody on the street. And the greatest crime of all is that you now have about 11, 12, 19 states not even capable of paying this minimum wage. It's extremely criminal. These governors should be on trial. How have they managed the resources of all of those states? And I'm happy we are talking about corruption. This whole agenda about a security vote that is as huge and capable of paying minimum wages for all workers. Can any of these governors tell Nigerians that they've not paid their workers for 9 months, for 10 months, 11 months? Have they also, as governors of those states, not earned their wages for those 9 and 11 months? So if Mr. Governor can earn all of his wages all of this period, it is criminal. They should be on trial for this. But unfortunately, like we know, this system cannot try their own members. It will require Nigerians in their millions to come all out. And that is why we are not opposed to this scrap SAP. What needs to be scrapped, what needs to be scrapped is this government, is this system. Because if you don't, all of these ills will remultiply themselves and will continue. It is important to tell ourselves what is the current value of the current minimum wage. And let's go back into the past. In 1981 in this country, the minimum wage was 125 naira. 125 naira, that was the minimum wage. But what was the value of the dollar? 56 kobo. So it meant that in 1981, Nigerians were earning as much as $223, $24. If Nigerians were earning $223, or let's say $220 in 1981, in the 80s in this country, do you know what that is in naira value today? You are talking about 222 times 400 or 360 naira. You'll be talking about 80,000, 90,000 naira. That was the value of what Nigerians were earning in 1981. So if you're talking of 18,000 naira today, this is over 300 or 400% less than the value of what Nigerians earn. If you pay a Nigerian worker today 80,000 naira, 90,000 naira a month as minimum wage, you are only meeting them with the standard of 1980.
We've not even adjusted for inflation.
Exactly. And this explains why the ruling elites, earn all of those huge allowance that they earn.
So there's this fundamental problem. The system has been designed with people that are disempowered to challenge the ruling class.
And keep them busy. Yeah. And fool all of us that they are fighting corruption. And make import of all of these little things that takes place.
So what can be done?
Well, what needs to be done is the building of a movement and the question of posing a clear alternative. And this is where I must say that we can't give up. Nigerians, pre-colonial, colonial, and today have demonstrated the will, the fact that they can all collectively work together. I was speaking with some students about the 1929 About Women protest, and I asked myself, who were those women? Unfortunately, even our research, our history has not even been able to document the names of all of these women. They were actually ordinary people. They were able to mobilize the whole of Aba, as well as the men. And collectively, they demonstrated opposing the imposition of taxation on them.
For Nigeria, the way the polls has been designed, the ruling class
will always
win.
Now, let me point out that elections in Nigeria for this Fourth Republic, use the Anambra case as an example and go back and look at all other elections. You've had less than 20 to 25% even of the so-called registered voters voting. I'll be 50 next year. How do you explain that I've only casted my vote once in my whole life in an election when Gani Fayemi, National Conscience Party, was vying for presidency? You have a majority of Nigerians not going to the ballot box to vote.
Why will that change?
They conclude that none of these parties are representing them, and they are valid. So what this means is that the moment a political party emerges that represents them, Nigerians are going to troop out in their millions, and no election can be rigged. One of the beautiful things about how Buhari came into power for a majority of the northern masses is that they fundamentally believed him, and they stood in a place like Bauchi. They stood in their millions. They voted. They went with the ballot boxes to be counted, believing in the elusive idea that the Buhari regime will transform their lives. The same thing will happen the moment the political party of the mass, with all of the necessary corrective ideas, revolutionary ideas of transforming this country, and I'm happy to tell the world that the Socialist Party of Nigeria won its judgment in court. We've been in court with INEC the past 3 years over the registration of political party, and we want to try, to call on all Nigerians that we can become that kind of a political party. We want to call on Nigerians that workers, youth, unemployed, we can all collectively come together on the agenda that the wealth of this country should be owned by the mass of the people. And I must say that democracy, like we have pointed out, must grow away from its concept, from paper to become a reality, only on the basis of the mass involvement of the people, not just in casting their vote, but even in the process of determining what is produced, in the process of determining how decisions are taken in all parts of the country.
We all come from different backgrounds. That's what unites us. We all know life is about freedom of choice, and money transfer should be the same way. Introducing MoneyGram My Way. Send and receive money just about anywhere, using whatever method that works best for you.
But I think that democracy would always have corruption in this climb as its Achilles heel. Let us assume that your political party wins tomorrow. This is the day after. You still have to deal with the police. You still have to deal with the judiciary. I'm sure you are aware of what happened with Justice Ademola.
Yeah.
Who the Judicial Council admitted that he was in misconduct.
Now, do you know one big... Okay.
So it is obvious that he was able to get it
fall back into...
right? He got a judgment, but his peers saw him as guilty, right? This is the judiciary that should have zero tolerance to corruption. So I put it to you, this is the day after, you are now president, your party is in power, you have the police who will not suddenly roll over and
disappear from the pages of history.
Just align
from the arena of history,
with your ideas or ideals. You have the judiciary, and you have the Nigerians who have been psychologically conditioned to believe that corruption will one day reward them.
If they keep at it.
If they keep
applauding those that are there now, their own turn will come.
So this is the day after.
Now let me tell you that what we'll attempt to do in Nigeria is not strange. History is replicated with a lot of examples. A movement of the mass, to transform the society, is not about empowering some few individuals to go and do it. It is putting the millions of all of us on our feet. And with that kind of mobilized force and power in all endeavors of human life, we will be able to overcome all resistance. Let me tell you that the police, the army, even with all of its harms, are organs of the mass of the ordinary people ultimately. There's no way we are going to coast into victory and think that those institutions will not play all of their fundamental role in helping, in aiding those processes. The task of transforming this country, and a day after for the process of change, is a day after of realizing that all of the existing bourgeois neoliberal institutions must have to be brought down. When Engels says that the state must wither away, it's not entirely wrong, because you can't take control of these states, of all of their institutions, without commencing the process of transforming them. And how do you begin? With the military, there will be the question of providing as much training to as many, because as long as some few individuals monopolize the instrument of force, the possibility of using it as an instrument to crush and use that as a basis of supporting the ideas of the ruling elite.
The training is a problem of the military?
I'm not talking of the military, I'm talking of the mass of the people, ultimately.
Okay.
Because new institutions needs to be rebuilt that will put down all of these existing institutions. They need to introduce democratic ideas of workers being part of the management processes of all institutions. And this, in the judiciary, for example, it means that lawyers, workers, judicial workers, so instead of just a select few of individuals deciding the entirety of the future, the mass of people will be involved in all of the processes. And this democratic process of translating democracy in real terms in all institutions, in all organs and processes of decision making, with the clear interest of meeting the needs of the mass of the people, will become a huge force with which to begin to bring down all former existing institutions and create new institutions that will meet the needs of the mass of the people.
There will still be a fundamental problem. The people that are going to be in these new spaces
will not drop from heaven. Will not be born on that day.
They are the corrupt people.
The fervent of coming into power, the process of mobilizing. Because don't think the ruling elites are going to fold their hands. There is no way that we can electorally win an election in this country if Nigerians are not out there in their millions to vote and defend their vote to the tilt. And what we will do if you come to power is not to allow Nigerians to go back home and say that, yes, we have done it. They would remain on their feet. There will be need to begin to create new institutions that will ensure that Nigerians from all streets, take our local government for example, who are our councillors? Who is monitoring them? We must have parliaments, street parliaments to decide what the local government will do. When allocations come to the local government, who decide how it is spent? From all local governments, from all states, from everywhere, instead of having your legislators 4 years who are looking to Mr. Governor to give him more dash to be able to make policies, we are going to have institutions and organs that will check all elected officials. Our party will have people elected on the basis of the wages of public officers. So we are not talking of coming into power and think that we are messiahs and that as individuals we are saints and that we are going to... No, it is the mass of the people in their millions armed with the idea that this wealth belongs to all of us, managing it in a way and manner to meet with all of our needs. We can gradually, one after one, begin to resolve all of the contradictions in this society. Democracy for us will not be a 4-year thing. It's going to be alive every single day. Our government is in power every single day. To bring millions of Nigerians into politics, it's not just about having people joining a political party and maybe take a day out to go and discuss one issue or the other. And I think that process is such that the will of a 4 years can't stop it. It's going to be outlived the 4 years. This is not to say that bourgeois democracy offers the best of what can be defined as democracy. It's important to know that once Nigerians start on this path, all of the initiative and our creative ability will come out into the fore, and the best of all of us will come out. The best of human ideas have not yet been arrived at, or all of the doors closed on all of us. So I'm not saying that we can sit down here now and theoretically plot how a government of transforming Nigeria will be, but with the will, with the millions of Nigerians in it, all of the best. And don't forget, an effort in Nigeria is not just an effort for Nigerians. It's an effort that will be endorsed by the whole black world. It's an effort that can open itself to accept expertise from all parts of the globe. Can you begin to count how many Nigerians are outside of this country with all of their expertise and can't come into this country? A city in the US alone, you'll be amazed how many trained Nigerian doctors are working in that city in the US. So with a government serving all of our interests, we are going to tap into the best of all possible ideas from all parts of the world. And with all of this working together, we can move Nigeria forward. We can move Africa forward. We can begin to declare a new initiative for the globe.
Well, I mean, I agree with the fact that if you know that you have a blank slate and you're willing to create an environment where the best ideas thrive, you will have a good chance in transforming Nigeria, despite the huge deficits we have in governance, we have in infrastructure, in all aspects of Nigerian life. Let us go back to the corruption issue. You have already hinted on something. You give a man an AK-47. You give him little restraint, little accountability. You tell him to go on the streets and do the most difficult work in the world. Any given day, a Nigerian policeman can get shot. Any given day, the risk that for the Nigerian policeman is higher than the risk for the oil worker that gets paid so much for the expertise and the risk of the job, right? Then you expect them not to find a way to help themselves. I think that we're just being unrealistic about these issues. The NSAS cry is very important because the injustice has to be stopped. But do you think that going forward it should be a reorganization and reform of this unit, or a total scrapping of SARS?
Now, because the question of crime and combating crime is one huge, long issue for the ruling elites. Unfortunately, they are not even true to type on the basis of their own theory and their own ideas as to how to resolve it. For the ruling elites, crime is a product of delinquency. It's a product of immorality on part of people, and that you can only combat it by what? By force. We fundamentally disagree. All of the social milice in this country, including armed robbery, it's a product of the failure of the ruling elites, and that the way to go, create jobs, pay appropriate minimum wage. Then you don't have to provide all of these armed gangs against the rest of all of us. But unfortunately, even going on the basis of the ideas of the ruling elites, they do not provide the necessary equipment, the necessary appropriate training. This is the 21st century. The PRO of the police was on paper saying that those campaigning to end SARS are the armed robbers, that they are just masquerading. For me, that statement is a positive. It's a positive because the police, is feeling the heat. The top hierarchy of the police is feeling the heat of all of the media campaigns and all of the campaigns, against all of the inhuman acts and brutality being carried out by SARS and a lot of armed wings of the police. Funnily, you now have a police force that has a human rights desk in every office station. Unfortunately, what the police hierarchy does not realize is that the human rights desk should first and foremost begin from inside the police. The Nigerian police is one vicious organization that thinks from a military, dictatorial perspective. It forgets that it's dealing with a civil population. And this is where we create and allow the police rank and file the right to have a police union. So that organ of a police union will provide them a means of first and foremost taking up their employer for an appropriate working standard condition of work to execute his work. If you provide all of the necessary training, except when there are armed boys on the street, you actually don't need to send armed men and policemen on the streets. This country does not have a fingerprint data from crime scenes. And you know how many people are taken into police custody every day? For my activities, I've been taken to the police maybe so many times. I'm not sure that the police even have my own finger thumbprint anywhere, if to match with any other crime scene at any particular moment in time. So in a digital age, so when you talk about SARS, it solves nothing ultimately. Because combating crime and fighting crime these days with all of the ideas that humanity possesses now, can be done in a more technical, humane, more better approach than all of the approach that is being adopted by the Nigerian and by the Nigerian police. But I think we must agree that those campaigning for SARS to be scrapped are using all of the data and facts of the atrocities being committed, not just by SARS, but armed policemen against unarmed civilians. For every one single armed robber that has been caught, 10, 15, 20, 100 Nigerians have been victims. To the point that every arrest is an opportunity to induce or to collect money from Nigerians who themselves are more worse off than them. This is what has brought so much heavy heat in the current campaign against us. But we do not share their illusions. Scrapping it will not resolve any of the contradictions. While we think that all of the necessary reforms are necessary, we know that this system is incapable of carrying out all of those necessary reforms that will ensure that we have a civil police. We need to have a situation where all of our police stations are democratically managed by existing residents, organizations, elected representatives of people who live in that community, so that if you arrest somebody into the community, as a representative of the people who live in that community, I can come and identify that this man will not pay anything for him to be released. They keep telling us that bail is free, but we know that no bail is free, and that raids go on day in and day out. In Ajegule, we have a series of running battle with the police over illegal arrests and illegal raids that still go on in all parts of the country. This is what is annoying to millions of Nigerians, that ordinary poor Nigerians who are even in worse conditions are being forced to go and squeeze blood from stones to pay for practically committing nothing for no crime. So you have a police that should combat crime that has become an organization that is only combating and attacking Nigerians to fend for its what? For its needs. But I agree with you, there's a need for a police force in a state, in a society. But this current police force does not meet the needs of the Nigerian people. It is not an humane police organization. So we support the agitations for reform, but we are not deceived. To have a better police, you must resolve the question of the minimum wage. So instead of telling us to say scrap SAP, we say scrap this system. Scrap this government, replace this system, replace this government with a working people government that will put the interests of the mass of the people in place, that will provide the necessary training to realize that the police should go out and defend the ordinary person and not use its instrument, its arm, as a basis of oppressing or extorting from the ordinary person. The philosophy of the Nigerian police is mistaken. It is colonial. And that has not been effected since 1960. So if you don't carry out all of these changes, if you do a name change branding, or a new team branding, it fundamentally changes nothing. How many inspector generals of police in the wave of being appointed have scrapped roadblocks for the wave of the moment? But roadblocks are back day in and day out. Lagos, for example, you need to know the harrowing experience Lagosians are going through. Why we don't think that it is entirely not wrong to ban Okadas as public transport systems. But we live in a society that all of the alternatives that will resolve all of this has not been put in place. A city like Lagos, not just Lagos, Nigeria, the railway tracks in Nigeria remains the colonial railway tracks that were constructed from the ports into areas where you have raw materials that the British colonialists were extracting our resources to their metropolitan cities. And yet, since 1914 till date, massive cities have developed in all parts of the country that requires mass transport. The colonialists have not developed an alternative. So in a place like Apapa, where tankers and containers have taken over all places, and Okadas are the only instrument with which to move to a place, and you see this scene, which I still saw some 2-3 days ago. Policemen park their vehicle and they are raiding and chasing Okadas. You ask yourself, can't they see that this whole lane is blocked and that every other person has to go one way. They are under the whole place and the police vehicle, they park their vehicle and they begin to raid Okadas. They begin to take on vehicles taking one way. So our police has fallen to that level. But again, they are encouraged by the ruling elites. We must not run away from the fact that we are under police. Over 50 to 60% of our police officers are busy, not involved in anything about crime. Too many of them are chasing after traffic rules and regulations, which is the minutest work that a policeman should be trained to do. If you go away from all of those huge figures, you have a huge numbers of our policemen and women busy engaging in serving Oga Madam, in being hurdlers to political appointed officers.
We need all those figures actually to show that the police force has been privatized by the ruling class. Thank you so much for making our time to be with us today.
Thank you very much.
We all come from different backgrounds. That's what unites us. We all know life is about freedom of choice, and money transfer should be the same way. Introducing MoneyGram My Way. Send and receive money just about anywhere, using whatever method that works best for you.